know this for Oregon State University PDC-PRO Fall 2024. This is call number 4, and the next lesson due is lesson 4, Microclimates and Current Zones, which is due next Monday on November 25th at 9 a.m. Pacific. And a couple of folks waiting to come in, so I'm going to let them in. Oh, where's our waiting room? Here we go. Admit all. Morgan and Michael, good morning. Tell the guys you can hear me.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, Morgan.
Are you saying you can't hear me?
Hi there.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, we're going to go to Zoom. I tested it. It was working.
Susan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I can hear you too.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yes.
Morgan, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you both.
Hooray. Okay. It's kind of weird. It's coming out of my, oh, I see. My speaker output is coming from my my auxiliary screen, but that's okay. Good morning. Our
Susan,
first office hour post-election.
Have you been impacted by the fires in your region, Susan?
It was close. Ultimately, no. It's still smoky. We were evacuated for 2 days. The ranch I work at was like less than 2 miles from where the fire started. So it was very dicey for a few, well, for the 2 days, for Wednesday and Thursday. But kind of by a number of different miracles that we all made it through. So yeah, there were a lot of homes lost just above us, like very close, but yeah, we were okay. So
Yikes.
Yeah, it was a very close call. So good reminder about go bags and emergency precautions and all of that. Is when actually some of the luckiest things was that, I mean, our power flickered on and off a few times. Even like through Tuesday, it was because the wind was high. And a lot of people in the city lost power like for several days. And even though we were like time that we actually lost any food. So that was really nice. And our water is okay. And a lot of people in the city still aren't able to use their drinking water, to use their tap water. So even for washing and stuff, like the water was so badly contaminated. So yeah, we were very lucky, very grateful. So. Good morning, Bryson.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. So I just gave my little intro before I brought everybody in. Do you guys have any questions, or do you want me to just go through the assignment or assignments?
I mean, it's fine for me to go through the assignment and then ask questions after that.
Sure. Okay, we'll do a little quick fly through then. All right, so this is going to be lesson 4. So it'll be microclimates. Oh, is that your hand? No, that's not your hand down.
Oh, no.
Just hat adjustment, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the template. All right. Okay. So yeah, so the lesson 4, assignment 8 is going to be microclimates. The main things it's the 2 assignments are quite similar in that you're basically looking at just the idea of zones. So in the first one, you're looking at where there's more solar exposure, if it's hot and dry, if there's a lot or not very much moisture, just basically like just the climate attributes of that. So you might have, like, on the north face of your house, you might have a very shady, cooler spot that tends to retain more moisture, usually on their south or your southwest facing. You're going to have very high sun exposure, very dry, a lot less vegetation. So if you don't have any vegetation at all, you can just speak to, just that's bare soil. You can call it like a bare soil, full sun exposure. Just pick a descriptor that kind of captures those main attributes. You're going to start identifying some of the species that are on your site. So you're going to try and pick out what the native species are. So we're just asking for 5, just as representative examples. If there aren't any, which is especially true in suburban, urban sites, identify what you've got. And if you don't have any at all, use something that's adjacent to your site, whether that's somebody else's property, an undeveloped area, a park. So just get 5 examples of plants that, if they don't already occur there, are likely to be there. This is a good place to start practicing, if you haven't already, proper use of scientific nomenclature. So you're going to have your genus and then your species name. The convention is that those are always in italics. So say you've got a Rubus californicus. Rubus is going to be capitalized, so capital R, and then those 2 words are going to be italicized. And then your common name is going to go below in just plain text. So that's straightforward. And then you're going to use your base map. Usually it's, I recommend that students just use their line map, their first base map that they used for in lesson 2. If the aerial satellite image adds to that, like really gives you more information without over cluttering it, go ahead and use the aerial satellite image. Typically, I like to see just having the line map because it keeps things a lot simpler. But if the aerial image is really showing you, like, where those trees and shrubs are and stuff, and it's not cluttering the image up too much, go ahead and use it. So I'm going to leave that up to you, to your discretion. And then, of course, fill out all the parts of the title bar, which most folks have got already. I'm seeing some students leaving the brackets in. I'd like to see those removed. I mean, it's a stylistic choice, but it just clutters up and adds more text to it than is needed. Okay, the usual, your scale, compass, rose, make sure those are appropriate to your map. Okay, then you're going to do microclimates plant ID table. So this is going to be your 5 plants that you identified, or taken from your 5 plants that you identified on the previous slide, and then where those are going into different microclimates. So you can just fill out this table. Again, follow the conventions for scientific names, which they've given you. They've used an example here. Haven't italicized. I'm not going to take points off of it, but it's just a good habit to get into, especially if you start doing client reports. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Lila in. Okay. Okay, good morning, Lila. Okay, drop a comment in the chat if you can't hear me, if you're having any tech issues. I'm just going over the lesson, the assignments for this lesson. Okay. And then here again, this is going to be the attribute specific to your microclimates. So what this is going to look like if or as it changes through the seasons. So some areas aren't going to get any winter sun at all, but they do get summer sun. Some of those might be full sun all year round. So just fill out the table. Take the same names and attributes that you've applied elsewhere, like keep that consistent. So once you've described it here, just carry that forward. You don't need to keep writing things out. Take a little snapshot of that image and insert it there, and you should be good. This sample of existing species, you very well may not have 5 species in each climate. Most sites won't have a full 5 species, but fill out the ones that you can. You could also put in brackets like ones that you'd like to see there, or ones that you see in a similar microclimate on another site that you could think of. Just indicate those, put them in the list in brackets there. So.
And for clarity on this, Susan, you're
Sure.
wanting to list the ideally 5 species that are currently present or that are indigenous to the area that would tend to be native species?
Well, here you're going to go first with what's there. And if you're looking for ones that, if you don't have anything there or what, yeah, then you'd be, if you don't have, like, say you've only got 2 species there, like it's overrun with a weedy species, then you could suggest like a couple of native species that you could have in there.
Okay.
I get a lot of students that are like, I don't have, this many species in every single microclimate. I'm like, a lot of students don't. So you can indicate what you'd like to have there, or some native species that would do well in that microclimate.
Susan, just another question.
Sure.
For clarity here, if you don't have any species that are native and they're all planted, is it okay to list those?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, no, we've jumped up to zones. Okay, so you're going to do a SWOT analysis on your microclimates. So that might be like, your strength might be that you've got a lot of different microclimates, which is a nice thing to work with. A threat might be that you've got a lot of an excessive, like of a very hot, dry microclimate that covers a lot of your site. So just go through that with the lens of that particular assignment. Okay, and then with your current zones,
could I just ask one more question, Susan, on the microclimates? Sure. So with regard to like shade versus sun, the amount of shade changes depending on the time of year.
Sure.
How do you capture that? Like,
so
like in the summer, there's like no shade from a fence, let's say, but in the winter, there's lots of shade from a fence. Right.
Yeah. So then you could call that like a partially shaded or a seasonal shade site, or seasonal shade microclimate. Okay. And then indicate that in your table here, that in the summer it gets full sun, and in the winter it's partly shaded by the fence.
And then what about shade from the structure, like a house, like morning sun versus afternoon sun type of thing?
Yeah, it could be the same, because some plants will do, like some plants that want full sun, like they really want that south facing. They want, they do best when they're getting sun right from when it comes up all the way through to the end of the day. And there may be a site on there may be a location or microclimate on your site where that's possible to get that full sun all year round, morning to night. Other spots are going to have shade, say only in the morning or only in the afternoon. And then you could call that a partial shade.
Okay. Got it.
I'm just thinking like of our own site, we've got one patch by the house that it's very difficult to get anything established, because it doesn't matter what time of year or what time of day, it's always going to be in the shade, because it's at a corner, an inside corner of the house.
Right. So
it's always going to be cool. It's always going to be shady. We could do hostas. We could do like a little pond system in there, but we're never going to get sunflowers or like, we had a lemon verbena in there. My mother-in-law had one there for like 10 years. And then when we moved it to the front of the house on the southwest facing side, it went from being, like an 18-inch tall stick to being like this full-blown, like 12-foot tall tree. So, yeah. So there's things that like might grow there, but like, we're looking for the places that something's actually like kind of thriving and looks like it's doing well there. If I don't want to get too much into the nuances, because you're trying to capture like what the overarching pattern is. But say you've got 7 species and you've got like, take the main ones that you're seeing in a particular location, if you have to choose. Your eyebrows are very expressive, Michael. Okay. Sometimes I'm trying to tell them like, if you're like, okay, but, or if it's working for you. So if there's any clarification needed, please don't.
That's all fine. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay. Any other questions on microclimates? No. Okay. Current zones. So very similar ideas. The microclimates, except now that now you're looking at frequency of use, intensity of use. So really, zone 1 is like your daily, several times a day. We've got multiple people going there. Often this is like a front door area, also a backyard. And then zone 2 is going to be like a little less frequent. It might be like the chicken coop, or if you've got chickens, or it might be sort of like further into the backyard where you'll hang out there on the weekend. And then all the way up to zone 5, where you've basically got no maintenance as a wild zone. Now, a lot of properties won't actually have all 5 of these. Like on smaller, like suburban urban properties, you might only get up to like zone 3, in which case you could, what's nice to see actually is if you can find some like zone 4, zone 5 that's in your neighborhood. So say like a zone 5 might be a large park area. Could be zone 4 if you go there, fairly regularly and use that like kind of like your nature connection area. But it can be an area that you go to get like native plant material, just to get like a connection to nature if you go to meet other people in your community. These zones are really an idea of like how you use your space. There's no hard and fast rules. It's really just trying to get a sense of like, what are the areas you use most often, most intensively, that you're going to have the most intensive needs from, and then what zones are you going to have that, like, for instance, like what zones are going to have less needs, might have more intensive needs, but only like once or twice a year. So for instance, like I had a student once that was working with maple trees. They didn't have to do a lot of maintenance with those trees, but when they had to do it, it was quite a job. So they wanted to make sure they had really clear, good access, good materials, transportation through there, so that the short amount of time in the year that they used that zone 4, zone 5 section, they could access it easily. Whereas like right around their house was their zone 1, that was like their kitchen garden, their raised beds, like herb gardens and stuff like that they would be using every single day, multiple times a day. And then everything else is kind of falls in between. So where are you going to put the chicken coops, or if you're raising animals, where you might put fruit trees, depending on how often and when they're producing, how much pruning they need, how much, like, say, like other plants or ground covers you're doing. All those sort of factors are going to work in. So zone 1, zone 4, and 5 are usually pretty clear, and zone 2 and 3 are definitely the ones that you can find yourself like kind of head scratching of like, well, I don't know, it's kind of a zone 2, zone 3. Pick a line. It's fine. Just figure out like kind of where those areas lie. The real exercise is in getting a clearer picture of where approximately you put the most amount of energy, where you're going to want to have like materials that are easy to move, or that you can do storage, and those aspects that are related to like patterns of travel across your site. Is that clear? This is kind of one of like the foundational aspects of permaculture design, which isn't put a lot of pressure on it, like make sure you get it right. It's that it's something that you can play with, and something that you can design for change over time. Like especially if you've got like kids growing up, or if you're going to be changing the patterns of use, like installing an orchard, often the zones tend to kind of evolve over time as you start to use areas more intensively. Often I see like what was a zone 3, when you've got a really nice design and then you build like, say, a pergola or a seating area, you wind up with that being used a lot more intensively than it was in the past. Then you're going to indicate what we call circulation elements. So this is your pathways, and then how frequent you use them. So footpaths, and then like a car or bike path, wherever that lies on your property. There's a couple of nice examples here to show that. The one on the right is like definitely a more urban site, so quite a small site that only has has some pretty simple pathways, and then this larger, more a little bit more rural. It looks like this is a few acres, so 32 acres. Okay. Oh, there's big buildings for 30. I think it must be like 3.2 acres. The resolution is quite small on the screen here. But you can see that there's a lot more complex pathways with this, like going up and down the slope and terraces and things like that. So, okay, any questions there? Nope, we're good. Okay, and then your SWOT analysis, same, just looking at it through the lens of the assignment, and you are done. And that's your lesson 4. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. Right. Okay. I don't know if you guys want to just scan through your own assignments and see if any questions come up.
Susan, I wanted to get your input on something if possible.
Sure, Morgan.
So I had one property I was planning. I'm still, way behind and trying to get, but I've got some wind in my sail right now.
Good.
I've actually been finding that, and this is just for whatever it's worth, struggling with doing stuff on the Google Slides directly, just because I'm in and out of logging out of my Google accounts because I do IT support for other people, and it's just disjointed constantly trying to log in and out constantly. So I think it might have even been Michael that I was inspired by, because I realized I could actually just download and manage the PowerPoint file offline and do a lot of my work offline and just upload it. So that has been a big breath of fresh air that it helps my workflow a little bit for whatever that's for future students, if that's some challenge.
Okay. I have had a few students do that. It doesn't always work because of the transition from PowerPoint into Google Slides.
Yeah.
So I hesitate to really offer it as at the outset, because if they jump into it and then they're like, oh, they lost all the formatting.
So,
but you're right. It's a very good.
And just so I know what I'd potentially be stepping into, it's just basic formatting, like fonts, spacing on where things are. Those are generally the issues, and I can just tweak those on an as-needed basis, I assume, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's been helpful. And then secondly, the interesting thing. So I hopped in on Andrew Millicent's webinar he did. Was that last week or the week before? And one of the things he was touting was the value of getting involved. Like he said, my OSU professorial badge, it's in his mind is not the way everyone else kind of flash it as a badge, but he sees it as an asset or a tool for just getting connected to local universities, to have students you're able to access and implement projects and doing different things. So that kind of inspired me. So I actually got in contact with a local university here and talked to. They're trying to get a agribusiness department going, where they just slap on 5 or 6 agriculture classes on top of their business degree.
Okay.
And so I just said, hey, here's my credentials, years ago, biology major and blah, 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 blah. And the guy's like, hey, I want to help you get involved. I want you to meet the kid that's over our agriculture club. They got 100 students, blah, blah, blah. We own this property in the area. We want to make it an ag learning center. Could you help us design it? So now I'm thinking like, I want to pivot, I think, and make this my design property. Yeah. I don't want to be overly ambitious and try to do 2 properties unless you think there's some synergy in doing it. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask is, if I'm going through and stepping through assignments, is it just as easy to do 2 where I'm just doing a little extra data entry, but I'm doing kind of my headspace as in, I'm taking measurements, or I'm doing a base map, or am I biting off more than I can chew, trying to do 2 properties at once?
How close are those 2 properties?
They're close. They're within 5 minutes of each other.
So a lot of your plants, your wildlife are going to be similar. Your water analysis is going to be very different.
Okay.
Your zone 1, like you're basically like your example zone 1 design is going to be very different, because one is what I'm assuming one is the residence and one is going to be like more of a learning educational area space.
Yeah, I mean it's a local home surrounding the college that they bought, and that's what they want to convert. So it has the bones. Yeah, it's got kind of ranchy features though. It's got like sheds, and it's got some little like pole barn type structures on it. It's just 2 or 3 acres. So it's got some infrastructure that's kind of already leaning that direction for ag. They're thinking about getting goats, chickens, bees, stuff like that. And so I want to help them get going with that. But
personally, I would say stick with 1, because you're when your eyes are going in different directions, it's hard to see.
Yeah.
I do see the temptation. And I'm the kind of person that would absolutely want to do like 2 or 3 in tandem, because I'm like, oh, but then I could just like copy this over to this and this. And
Yeah.
So I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I think I would focus on getting the 1 through. And then a lot of that information you probably can pull forward and just replicate the template. I mean, because you have access to the report, like the active master that you originally copied, and just make a new copy and start. A lot of our students do that, actually. They use that as their client template. I've used it to some extent. I don't get a lot of call to do like a full out design for people. Partly because I kind of hide under a rock and I just do like really quick one-off consults.
And maybe we've talked before too, but do you find that what we're doing for the scope of the class is like overwhelming for a client typically? And I understand too, you want to keep your budget a little bit more sparse. And maybe this was even a question I asked in the chat with Andrew Millicent. But like, how much do you really bite off with a client expecting they're going to compensate you for this initial design? And his
not this much. I mean,
smaller. Yeah.
Basically, you'd be what you would do for a client would be like the final analyses. So like you'd want to have like a zones analysis, the microclimates analysis. A sector compass is very useful. I could definitely see a section on the site and regional challenges, like some of these like as summaries.
Yeah. So
there is a lot that you could hand to a client, but you wouldn't want to be charging a client for the time that it took to like fill out all of, like, some of that is research aspect. That's like, you're not going to charge them for like the amount of time that it would take to fill it out the way that you do when you're going through it in a course. Kind of like your therapist billing you for their psychology degree in a way, a little bit, maybe not quite. That's a bit of a stretch, but a similar idea is like, this is a learning process. It's going to take a lot longer. It's a lot more detailed. So then with a client, you could look at, you're going to need just sort of like an overview of these aspects, and you can pick and choose what to include. Now, the value of the way that Andrew's designed this, and this is based on our like common training with Darren Dougherty and the Regrarians platform, and from the permaculture scale of permanence, that those are both built off of. The value in having this sort of layer system where you work through like, the climate, the client understanding, water, geography, like your plant layer, is that you don't skip over anything. Because a lot of people want to see like, oh, well, I just want chickens and goats. Mm-hmm. I don't really care about whatever rainwater. We get lots of water. So I just had a client actually in Michigan that was kind of like this. And he's like, we get lots of rainwater. We're fine for water. I just want to know where I can put the goats. I'm like, well, if we don't look at all of those aspects, we're going to miss synergies. We're going to miss relationships that we can build in. That you get when you're really like systematically going through by layer. You wouldn't, for instance, have like a SWOT analysis in every section of a report with a client. You'd probably have like a single overview. And actually a student asked this question in an email just this week. And I was like, this is actually a really good point, was that I had, if I notice that students are like copying one SWOT analysis to the next, to the next, to the next, I start to ding marks, and not big, but I'm like, okay, it's supposed to be, each assignment is a lens through which, you see that particular set of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So copying it forward doesn't really capture that. And his point was like, well, he was like copying it forward and then adding anything new that had come up from the assignment. He's like, this is going to be huge by the time I get to the end of the course. So I'm like, that's actually a very good point, of that, like, we should have an overview SWOT analysis of the entire property, of like what has come up every single time, like what's come forward. And you can keep that in mind, but really having like a good overview is, one, something you would want to provide for a client. And two, I think it would actually be a good exercise for within the template. So I'm going to bring that forward to Andrew and Dow and Javin and see what they think. So it was a good point that I hadn't really considered in that respect. Does that answer like your multiple questions? Sorry,
Yeah.
there's kind of like four or five tangents
There's
that
kind
came in
of a
together.
buzz going in my head. You know, I'm excited, and so I'm just trying to like think through all the ramifications and how to be strategic to try to knock it out. But
yeah, if you'd want to, if the reason for doing those in tandem is to get, I should just, is part of the reason for wanting to do those in tandem to get feedback.
oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. My thought is I'm trying to build a portfolio of design that I can present to someone and say, hey, I'm qualified, you know, to do this.
Yeah.
Here's my certificate, a couple different projects I've worked on.
Sure.
So that's kind of where my head at.
Okay. I guess a couple of different approaches. Yes, you could go with it. You could go ahead and do that in tandem. Personally, I think that's a big risk because then you could get through the course and be like, I got totally overwhelmed and didn't finish either. And now I don't have my certificate again.
Right.
Or you go through the course with the current project, you know, get that, you know, clean that up as a portfolio project, as an example, get your certificate. Then, I mean, you could see if the school would cover your costs to do another course with this as an example. I've done that with clients where somebody paid for them to take the course with my support to take them through the course and make sure like that design actually got finished with one-on-one feedback. So there's different ways you can, you know, skin that cat or however you want to look at it. Or just, you know, just come back through the course. We could also talk about options of like, if you want to take yourself back through the course, because you'll have access to all those materials, take yourself back through the course if you want some accountability, or if you want me to just like me or one of the other instructors, for instance, and when I'm not attached to it, to check it over when you're done, then you could just hire that as like a consulting fee. So I know Javin and I both do like, it's like $150 for like a 90-minute call. It's not,
great.
That's extreme. So.
And then the other thing that came up, they're like, hey, like we want to pull you in and get you involved. We're really excited about you, which again, I didn't expect them to be so bullish, but yeah, but they're like, hey, we want to make you an adjunct, because they're thinking they can pull in with my IT stuff. I've done programming projects for like food service companies over the years, and they're like, oh, this is all tangential with agribusiness because you've done warehouse inventories and, you know, food sales and all this other stuff.
Sure.
So they're like, we want to bring you in maybe as adjunct professor with our IT department, as possibly with our, you know, our entrepreneur department. And they said, do you have a master's degree? I'm like, no, I've just taken a lot of, you know, partial classes, extension classes, different things. Is there some way to roll what we do with the permaculture design course into some sort of for credit, or put us on a path towards something at OSU with master's degree program? Or from what I saw, it didn't look like it, but I didn't know if you knew of any other unofficial.
Through OSU, yeah, so far as I know, no. PINA, the Permaculture Institute of North America, was working on a degree or diploma program. So far as I know, it has not been successful or has not moved very many people through their system. It's a great question, and let me look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other jam on that? Are you guys working on lesson 4? Are we kind of, how are things looking?
So I've been mostly just doing the reading and watching the, you know, the learning material stuff so far. Mm-hmm. And I sat down this morning to start looking at the slides.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Now, Morgan, I don't have an assignment from you yet, correct? Not to like call
That's
you out on the public. Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I went to look up your project and I was like, oh, I don't have it here. So okay.
Yeah, I got nothing right now. My goal is to start knocking out, just try to do double time and try to do one assignment each week until I'm caught up. That's kind of my goal. So.
Okay. And Bryson, I saw you submitted another assignment. So I'm getting caught up on marking. I'm always getting caught up on marking. I've got, there's the ones that trickle in. So I did see that you'd submitted.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think I submitted that last night actually for lesson 2.
Yeah.
The base map took me quite a bit of time to kind of get my head around. The property that we have is quite large, and we divided it up into 4 different sections. But I was really trying to find software that would allow me to design with detail that I could use in the future.
Sure.
I found, just for everyone's education, or just to let everyone know, I found this program called Scribble Maps, and it's really a nice tool. It's all web-based. It gives you a lot of different options to draw lines and polygons, and they even allow you to drop in icons and things like that. But what's great about it is you can export it as a .kml file, and then you can take it into the Google Earth, the web version, not the Pro. The Pro has some challenges with that, but on the Earth version, you can then zoom around your base map and your property in 3D, and it's pretty cool. I think it's like $20 a month. I just went ahead and paid for it while I'm here doing this class, and I was really just trying to find something that would be reusable. I didn't want to do all this work, especially the size of the property, and I'm like marking every tree and bush, and then it's just in a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm happy with how it turned out. I think it looks nice, and the fact that I can go back and change it over time and quickly take screenshots has been great. Yeah. So I think I'm on a good pace now. I think that was probably, one of the more challenging parts, and I was kind of nervous about moving on, knowing that we were going to use that as like our base map for other designs.
Sure. Neat. Okay. All right. Yeah. Do you mind if I do a screen share?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I just found your base map. I just brought your base map up. Sorry,
okay. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Computer engine's like running fairly slowly at the moment. Here. Yeah. So that looks really nice. Okay.
Yeah, I have two different house.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of detail. There's 2 different house sites, so I did do sort of a macro and a micro.
Sure.
And
okay. Yeah, and then same all in grayscale.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the satellite that is incorporated in it.
Okay. Well, thanks. I'm going to check that out, and there's always more digital tools cropping up, and so it's nice to be able to update the digital tool database or spreadsheet that Javin and company put together. So, okay.
And like I said, it's really kind of fun when you're all done and you can export that to Google Earth. It's great because you can kind of fly in 3-dimension and see your views and kind of go bird's eye or zoom in. It seems like it's going to be a really nice for anything I could do on it.
It's not working with Google Pro though?
It just has some limitations, a little more clunky, like Google Earth Pro. It doesn't seem to do like the 3D version of it when I'm importing that KML file for whatever reason, but the web version seems to like it just fine. There are some other limitations too in that program that they give you a lot of options to put in icons, and anything fancy doesn't transfer over that well. But if you're just using lines and the polygons, it works great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I'll check that out. All right, Lila, how are you doing? Been silent, hanging out in the background there.
I'm okay. I'm kind of struggling a bit, but I keep going back and just trying to fix things, but yet stay on top of the new and upcoming assignments. It's also really hard because my clients are my grandparents, so they're really stubborn and picky, especially with what I want to do or if I want to add anything. And it's just been hard doing that and then also working, and it's been a little challenging for me, but that's about it.
Yeah.
The base map especially was also really struggling for me.
Mhm. Okay. You're another that I haven't gone. I've got to get back into marking, which I can do after this. Start doing after this call. So. Oh, we're not going to load. We've got a lot of dots here. Okay. Did you have any specific questions for this lesson or previous lessons?
These, actually, this recent assignment is a little bit, can grasp it a little bit more. It's just like the plants and, marking them down, the native plants in the areas and zones, the climate zones and everything like that. So it's been a little bit more easier and been having fun learning that too, about the different plants and like where they survive better, and the sun and how it hits like the certain areas and why they do so well there. Because the plants that
are you
I'm
finding
marking
that
so far? Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Are you finding that kind of pulls together the information from the sector map?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
really cool.
Good. All right.
Lila, I just tried to access your slide deck that you posted there, and it's I don't think it's like accessible to the folks.
I've been having an issue with that too. Yeah, I'll have
Okay.
to
I've got access, so it looks like you shared.
just to you.
Probably, yeah, just with me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to find a way. It's really challenging for slides with me. I'm just not very technological advanced. How do I do that? Share and export. Manage access. Oh, there we go.
What are you trying to do? Oh, Bryson, you need to. Were you doing a screen share?
Sorry, I didn't know that I was going to alert you. I was just seeing if that was something I had.
Oh, okay.
To.
Yeah, you can do it with permission.
Okay.
if you have something to share, that's fine.
I see. I did have my Google Earth up, but I don't want to take any time away from people just to show that 3D visualization of it. But I can hold it for another time as well.
Okay.
Just try it again, Lila. It works now.
Try it again.
It works. It works.
Oh,
It
yay!
works
Thank
now.
you.
Oh yeah. Okay, I can see L and an elephant. So. Great. Okay. All right. Well, does that leave us all good for lesson 4 going forward? Okay.
I think so.
So I have a third big picture kind of question, if it's helpful for you
Sure.
as well. Or,
Sure.
so as you're engaging a client, and like obviously, like I think most of the people in this class are sold on permaculture principles, but as an ideology, like that's not always an easy sales pitch for clients that you might be engaging. So if you're pitching a certain design idea that's going to cost a significant amount of money or infrastructure, how do you compromise with them to set smaller goals or implement over time? What's your thought process on that kind of incremental engagement with them? How you chop that up, and does that make sense?
I'm not totally sure I understand the question.
So if a client's not totally, like they don't understand permaculture, and you're saying, like you mentioned, the person that wanted to do goats and chickens, and you're trying to help get them an understanding of the synergies to be gained.
Right.
Like someone may not have the sense that, oh yeah, I just want to put this barn over here. I'm like, well, you got to think about water, you got to think about access before you get to structures. So how do you engage a client where it's like, hey, let's talk about these things on the front end of the scale of permanence, and get a plan and kind of ease into that over time before we jump in with both feet way here at the end of the scale of permanence?
Sure. I talk about process. So when I first engage with clients, when I have one-to-one clients, I start with a questionnaire. So and I call it a land steward questionnaire to get them it's not a property owner, it's not a farm or a farm owner, it's a land steward. So that gets the language into their brain, or at least starts them off. with the concept that they're stewarding something. And then it's basically a set of questions. I'm happy to share it, actually. I'm happy to share it. I'm not going to pull it up right now because things are running so slow that I don't want it to jam, kind of jam the wires. But basically, that's like, it's essentially a way of getting at like, what are your values? Why are you here? What do you want this to look like long term? So having those sort of like big picture conversations pulls the lens out from like, well, we want the chicken coop here, to we want our kids to inherit this property and we want them to be able to eat food off of trees that they planted when they were kids. So, for instance, or like, oh, we want to be able to, grow all of our own food or grow 40% of our own vegetables or whatever. Like get some like ideas of like, what are they actually looking for? Why did they buy this property? What drew them to it? What are they challenged with? Because often it's those challenges that are like right up in their faces that is keeping them from stepping back and looking at the big picture. So if we can sort of put those challenges into a box, I mean, like, okay, these are just things that we're going to deal with in the process. They're not going to be the design drivers. Now, design drivers can be things like type 1 errors. So things like you put the house in the floodplain. We're not going to be able to move the house. So we've got to work around that. Other things might just be like, sometimes it's an HOA. It's things like that are very difficult or cannot be changed, without selling the property or moving on. So essentially framing that as like, we start with a kind of a 30,000 foot view of like, what do you, I call it a 30,000 foot view, but it's almost like the micros. Do you start with the micro of like, what do you as the human beings that are stewarding this property actually want? Now, I know you want more than just that chicken coop right there where you said it is. So let's step back from that decision that you've made and look at kind of what the long-term goals are. And then I can start talking, that kind of lines me up to start talking about like, okay, well, first we look at, explaining a little bit about the scale of permanence and saying, first we look at what's the climate, how much rain are you actually going to get? Or how much rain do you have to deal with if you're in an extreme, rainfall or extreme snow area or whatever? What kind of slopes are you dealing with? You don't want to start a pasture chicken operation where all you've got is slope to work with. I know Javin had a client like that at one point, that was all they wanted was a pastured chicken, and they were on like the side of a hillside. It wasn't going to make any sense. They had other systems for raising chickens that would, but that particular model that they had seen on Instagram would not. And then we can start working through those layers, and you can explain, it looks bigger than just helping you decide where to put the chicken coop or where to put the fruit trees. Because, when we make these early decisions, we're framing them into a context, and then you get the right answer of even, do you need a chicken coop? Do you want it there? Do you want, we could find a better place for it. And you can't necessarily do that without having the whole big picture. So I basically sell the big picture and the why of the big picture. And I'm vetting clients. If they're not willing to do that basic stewardship questionnaire, and I've had clients I've handed it to, they paid me, for a site visit. I went out and, spent 8 hours on their property, walked their land, did all, whole bunch of like kind of upfront data gathering stuff. They would not fill out that questionnaire. They would not tell me like what they wanted their long-term life. They couldn't tell me what their values were. And I'm like, I can make decisions from a landscape point of view, but it's going to be a waste of your money because I can't tell you I can't like reflect back to you what you're actually going to want to do, and say the amount of, the amount of time, or the amount of energy, effort, money you're willing to be able to put into this. So it's easy to plant the trees. It's not as easy to be maintaining them 5 years down the road. So, and that's why the client interview is really important. Like, how much money do you have to spend on this? How much time do you have to maintain it? How long do you expect to be here? And there's no right or wrong answer, but the design that comes out of it is going to change depending on those answers. So it in a way, it makes the design process a lot simpler because you start cutting out options, right? Like, well, if these people are only, I mean, I could give you examples all day long, but things kind of start to design themselves in a really nice way because it narrows your options in this beautiful way that humans have a very hard doing on their own, right? So.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. Whew. Yeah, I mean, working with Javin as a mentor about 10 years ago was really helpful for me in understanding that. Like, I mean, I had done a lot of like holistic management sort of introductory work, but really framing all of the design stuff in terms of like, how have you designed your life? And, oh, you haven't designed your life. Well, like, no wonder you have no idea where you're going or where you want to put things. So I mean, he calls it value-based decision-making, which I think is a good term for it, but really working from what you value, what you have to work with, and where you want to go.
Just curious there, Susan, to know what was their rationale for hiring you for a design if they weren't communicating what they wanted? I mean,
I was recommended by a mutual friend who knew me through farming and a bunch of different soil health stuff. So this guy had a very steeply sloped site. It was very steep on both sides. It was basically a 5-acre strip that went across a canyon. They wanted a food forest. They wanted to turn it into an educational wellness site. So they could tell me that much. They wanted it to be this like big fancy educational wellness site. And they wanted to attract a high value, like a high income clientele. So they could tell me like those kind of things, but they couldn't narrow down like he also wanted to be a traveling musician. His wife wanted to homeschool and was looking at like becoming a caregiver to her mother who was aging. They wanted to have 4 more kids. So there was a lot of like we could have this in conversation, but over the course of about 2 weeks of conversations, every time we spoke, it was like the goals and the metrics changed. So like, oh, well, we're thinking of actually, doing like canvas tents because we'll appeal to a broader market and we can set them up for like, under $5,000 a piece. I'm like, okay, so now you're talking about a completely different clientele than the high-end clientele you were talking about attracting. Well, we were thinking, we could build some and then it was a pool over here and it was this over there. And they basically brought me in to tell them where to put the fruit trees. But they didn't want to hear that, for one, they couldn't legally, they weren't going to be allowed to plant fruit trees and do a bunch of terracing below their house, which was perched on the top of a hill on I mean, basically, if I've ever seen a 100-degree slope, I mean, it was like this. And it was already eroding and calving off, and they had an excavator running at the bottom because they wanted to put in a pond at the bottom. So they basically cut into the bank. And when I talked to my mentors, they were like, run, like, don't put your name on that. And I'm like, I didn't know what I was getting into when I walked out there because you can't see everything up to date on Google Earth. So basically the motivation for him was like, where do we put the fruit trees? We want to have all these things. How do we make it into like self-sustaining and all of that? But didn't have and didn't seem to be able to or want to clarify, like really cut off the kind of, cut off some of the options in order to like focus on where they actually wanted to go. They didn't want to, there was a lot of kind of wanting to live in like the dream world of where we could do everything, but wouldn't actually look at the realities of the site that they were on. So I did bring in actually another consulting company who said the same thing at a much, much higher price point. So some of those are like judgment calls. I mean, he was a really nice guy, really nice family. I had dinner with them. I went out and spent a couple of days, beautiful, it was a beautiful site, really cool ideas. And at the end of the day, The liability was too high, and they didn't want to. Sounds like I'm really throwing people under the bus here, which I don't want to sound like. I don't mean to be, but it was sort of a litmus test for like how much reality are you willing to face. And you can only do so much with a property that looks like this, with your house perched on the top up here, right? And a blue line stream going down the middle. I mean, you're not allowed to get an excavator in there. You're not allowed to, like maybe in another state, but I work with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. You're not allowed to get an excavator in a blue line stream. And that was one of the biggest red flags of like, oh yeah, I don't want to go on too long about it, and I maybe already have, but that series of questioning, like understanding that you're kind of interviewing a client at the same time of, are they going to take the information and the process that you give them and work within that? Or are they hiring you to tell them what they want to hear and make it look pretty on paper for a bunch of investors? Or so understanding where their thought processes are at, and like, are they coachable? Can they learn from you as a professional, or from you given what you know? Is that helpful? I felt like a very long-winded tangent, but I had a lot of feelings about that. So a lot of thoughts.
It seems like people who are looking to do landscaping with permaculture are frequently like reasonably wealthy people. Is that true?
It's not. I don't want to. Yeah, there's a subset for sure. For sure, there's a subset of. I got this property. I have no idea what to do with it. I'm going to hire an expensive designer to tell me what to do, which is not an entirely bad idea. To an extent, in like getting a good assessment. Personally, I would rather see someone with property go through a course like this and do the stepwise work than hire a high-end consultant to do it for them. And that's just if somebody wants to hire me at a certain price point, then I will give them that information and I'll work through that and I'll show them as much as I can. Because the reality is that some people have property and they just do not have the time to dedicate to doing this over like 20, do that level of work over like 20 weeks, or, the Regrarians program is 14 weeks. It's intensive. It's an intensive learning process, but that's a process of learning about land stewardship. It's not just implementing and installing a design. I know a lot of permaculture designs that do get implemented, get installed, fail because there's either a maintenance system that was present and not implemented, or there was no maintenance system at all. So it was like once the plants are in the ground, they kind of almost fend for themselves. There's usually there's irrigation put in place, but there's not like the follow-up support. So if you've seen actually a lot of permaculture companies that start adding that on as an additional service, just so that they can see their installs like live to actually be able to produce. So yeah, and there's definitely a market there of high-end, people with more money and less time. So, or less inclination, less knowledge. So.
What about like people with like who are lower income, like a lower income neighborhood, who probably don't have the time but have like the desire to have some improvements in there?
Yeah, this is a tough one. And this is where I think some of the criticisms of permaculture as an educational model, or permaculture as it's been practiced as a profession. Like, there are some really valid criticisms, is that it can be kind of out of reach for the people that really need it most. And that's where I see like more of a social permaculture of really like building and valuing community networks, like circular economics, something somewhat more like David Holmgren's retro suburbia model. But even that has been heavily criticized for, like, you know, I'm sure that's nice if you can, you know, if you have those connections, or, you know, have people around you that are willing to do that. I mean, you know, we live in a city of, I think, 80,000, and we've got a small handful of people that are willing to create those sort of networks with us. And the city is, like, you know, what, 3-4 miles across, and they're, you know, we're on opposite ends of it. So it would be really nice to have a cul-de-sac of like-minded families. But the reality is that that can be a really big lift, and that can be a 20 or 30 year evolution, you know, evolving project. Mark Lakeman in Portland was a really good person in terms of, like, community building, and there's a specific term for the type of work that he was doing. But if you look at Mark Lakeman, he basically took kind of a neighborhood in his area in Portland and really turned that into, like, kind of a community project, and with, like, a backyard space. And there's been, like, some nice co-op housing projects that I've visited. But, you know, it's like, the issues that I think there's a lot of barriers to implementing the type of practices that permaculture could, or, like, would like to recommend. We've been trying to get, like, city food salvage going in our city for, like, 4 or 5 years. And I mean, I've got one friend who's picking up 200 or 300 pounds of kitchen waste every single week from a local restaurant. And she's got a 1/4 acre site. She's got a 1/3 of an acre, pardon me. And so she's got, like us, she's got muscovies, rabbits, chickens. And so she's cycling all that restaurant waste through them. And it would be great if we had more people doing it. But the city regulations and the policies are so restrictive that we have to always be working through these channels. And we're working with city, and we're working with, like, county regulation and the statewide, like, the organic food disposal regulations. Pardon me, I've had a tickle in my throat. It's really bothering me. But yeah, so sometimes it's those, like, regulatory policies that are like, we could do so much more for people that actually could really benefit from, you know, permaculture practices and from community building and all of those benefits. But the policies are so restrictive that it makes it really hard to do that. So, and hard doesn't mean impossible, and hard doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. But hard definitely makes it harder. And under the current administration, I don't see it getting a lot easier, but I do see it getting to be more of a motivator and more important to more people. So that's all I'll say about that. Yeah. All right. Well, I should wrap. I get kicked out of this room at about 11:45. So
Thanks.
It's been
Susan.
lovely to see you all. I appreciate it. Those were very good questions. Yeah, I could jam on a lot of those for much longer. But certainly, you know, I always welcome, like, thoughts or ideas on that. And Morgan, I really like that, you know, the way that you've connected that with, like, university. And I think there's so much room for so many different ways of implementing. You know, it's like private property. It's going through academics and university systems. It's going through, you know, community resources. And I mean, especially for us, like, having just gone through the mountain fire, you know, I mean, like, Target and Walmart downtown had their electricity turned off. And so they they're throwing out thousands and thousands of pounds of material that could be composted, could be fed to animals, could be, you know, and there's no channels for that waste as a resource principle, right? So yeah, lots of different ways to do good work.
Isn't it something like 2/3 of all the food is grown gets wasted somewhere?
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's one of the, the great thing, whether you call it permaculture, you call it, I mean, it's just composting or it's utilizing waste streams, whatever, all of that is work worth doing. And sometimes it's a heavy lift. So.
Yeah. I'm thinking about like, you've got that service. I don't know if you have it out your way, Susan, but there's that chip drop service where tree trimmers, usually they have to pay to dump their wood chips, right?
Yeah.
So I've been in the habit of just flagging them down, like, hey, if you got to pay to dump that somewhere, like you're welcome to just dump it right here on my property because that's that's helpful for me, and if it saves you money, please do. And they always take me up on it.
Yeah.
And then Chip Drop just charges them, I think it's a $20 a month, whatever fee for an access to database of customers that would like wood chips, and they just go and so there's a price point there that's helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like food waste, if you could somehow tap into a similar type service. Or
I want to say it's carrot.com. This is an organization. I say it's really a friend of mine who's spearheading it. Yeah, carrot.com. And you can get access to food resources that are, and basically so organizations can list themselves as having like a certain, like we've got 4 cases of oranges that are going to go to waste, or we've got 200 pounds of spoiled grain or whatever. So we're working on a channel where people can list food that's not for human consumption, but is for animal consumption. So it's coming bit by bit, and it's getting noticed more by like county regulators, and especially in California because of the organic waste regulation policy that's come up. So, yeah. All righty.
All right, everyone. Thanks.
All
Thanks,
right.
Susan. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Have a great week.
Bye.
Okay.